Hacked. Take a look at your screen right now. It's clear that the left's embrace of violence isn't going away anytime soon. They can't win a debate on the merits of their own policies, so they instead have to resort to fear and intimidation. With me now to discuss is the Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the American Principles Project, Jon Schweppe. Welcome, Jon.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Good. So for being Mr. Unity, Joe Biden sure is quiet whenever his supporters take a crowbar to the skulls of Trump supporters. So what was your reaction to this horrific display of violence from over the weekend?
Well, for those of us who follow Antifa, it's really not surprising to see them going after women and children and elderly people. That's pretty usual for them. But what was incredibly disappointing was all day you saw the media mocking Trump supporters, mocking them showing up to this march. And as soon as the violence started, they went completely silent. You saw nothing from the usual suspects, including never-Trumpers on the right. So really very disappointing. And, we saw this incredible turnout in Washington, D.C., an incredible patriotic display from Trump-loving Americans. And unfortunately, violence from the left, as usual, disrupted those activities.
So for those who voted for Biden this past go-around a few weeks ago to appease the mob, as it were, do you believe that these BLM and Antifa riots will stop even if Biden is officially made president, officially wins this election? Because just a few weeks ago, when BLM and Antifa were, quote-unquote, celebrating the media's premature calling of the election for Biden, here on the West Coast, there was a man in his house. He had a Biden-Harris sign in his front yard. His house still got surrounded by mobs, by rioters, yelling and screaming at him, telling him that if he didn't get out into the streets and be violent with them, that was a form of white supremacy. So what do you think? Will these riots, will they stop even if Biden is in the White House next year?
Absolutely not. This is a violent movement. It's a radical movement. My organization wrote a paper discussing some of their priorities, including the Breathe Act, which is likely to be introduced in the House in 2021. They want complete abolishment of prisons. They want to get rid of life sentences. They want to make it where if you're under the age of 24, you don't go to jail at all for anything you do, sort of a form of immunity. It's a crazy movement. And Biden and the kind of establishment neoliberal Democrats, they're going to have their hands full because these guys aren't going to go away anytime soon.
And one of the biggest patterns that's really stuck out to me ever since George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose back in late May and the riots first broke out is that wherever BLM and Antifa seem to gather, there's pedos everywhere. We all know why they want to abolish the police. I mean, when it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse back in Kenosha, Wisconsin, 2 or 3 of them were, at least one of them was a convicted pedo. The other was a convicted domestic abuser. There was a man in Portland, a black Trump supporter, who was stabbed in the back by a pedo Antifa, a convicted pedophile. And then here most recently, when it comes to the Million MAGA March, there was a video of an older man who was punched in the back of the head, and the BLM Antifa rider who punched him in the head, lo and behold, he is another convicted pedo. So what's with this pattern we've been seeing play out over and over again?
Well, birds of a feather, right? No, it is very disturbing to see these types of folks involved in these things. And I think it's really important for people to understand, the idea behind Black Lives Matter. Of course, everyone wants to say, yes, Black Lives Matter, but this movement isn't about that. It's not about police, even the instances where there was police brutality. It's not about that at all. It's about something much more radical. It's about fundamentally getting rid of the American way of life. And that's what they're out to do. And they've seen that violence works because they're not going to be condemned by the Democrats. They're not going to be condemned by Jake Tapper on CNN. None of these guys care. They don't mind seeing violence in the streets, and that's really damning, and it's very, very disappointing.
And what do you make of these big corporate America backing these rioters? 2 that come to my mind is Nike and Target. They both have seen their stores nationwide be looted, burned down, and yet they're some of the biggest financial backers of the Marxist BLM movement.
It's hard to understand. That was something that was in our report as well. There's so much corporate money, millions and millions of dollars going into this movement. It's not clear what their goals are outside of the fact that progressives, in their attempt to capture every institution in this country, have also captured Fortune 500 companies. And they are inspired by the same things that the rest of the left is. And it's, again, very disturbing.
And how does a new right fight back against, I believe, what you called the 3-headed hydra of big tech, woke corporations, and higher education?
Well, we need to start thinking a little bit, creatively outside of the box. I think conservatism for a long time has sought to just conserve the status quo, and the reality is that we're in a, more or less a cold civil war against some of these institutions, and they are out, pushing what they want to do on the American people. They're silencing us. They're taking away our rights, and so it's going to take a lot more, a more aggressive approach. And so whether it's President Trump, hopefully we are able to get the right result, or if it's a new Republican in 2024, we're going to need to be much more aggressive and look at these corporations and big tech and higher ed. We need to look at them as enemies, because that's the reality of it. They are trying to indoctrinate and take this country away from us.
The hard truth of it, Jon. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.